arranging for this space. It's an important space for us to have this conversation in because, of course, we're going to be talking about young people and their health and their ability to thrive and succeed, and no better place than where they receive attention and services to make them healthy, to make them whole, than in this particular space. So thank you very much to Gillette Children's for doing that for us on such short notice. The reason we're here today, of course, is because we're at the dawn of a special session that's been called by the governor and other legislators to deal with some emergencies that have occurred in our state, flooding emergency and tornado emergency. And we also have another emergency, a crisis that is afoot in many, many young people's lives and in our communities all across the state. And of course, that's a crisis that's represented by a sense of despair and hopelessness that results in very, very grave consequences in many young people's lives. And we've seen the media attention, and the aftermath and the consequence of bullying and harassment, intimidation that's going on in our schools that goes unaddressed, and these young people who feel like they don't have any connection and they're made to feel like they don't have worth and value. And that is just something that we just can't tolerate and we have to address. So we have a special session coming up to deal with emergencies and to deal with crises, and we have a responsibility to affirmatively act. We did act on this bill at one point in the recent past, 2009. We passed an anti-bullying measure, and we had an agreement on a bipartisan basis to pass that bill. Thought we had the governor's agreement as well. Unfortunately, he chose to veto it, and we've seen since then the crisis continue to play out across our communities and in many, many young people's lives. Justin Aberg, Tyler Clementi, Asher Brown, Seth Walsh, Billy Lucas, Carl Joseph Walker Hoover, Jahid Herrera, each one of these is a precious life, a precious jewel in our community, in our schools, precious child of parents. It is unacceptable to turn our back at this point when we have the opportunity to act as a state, as a community, as a legislature. And the simple fact is, this emergency is one of our own creation. We can respond, we can change this, we can take those affirmative steps so that every kid who goes to school knows that they are valued, that they'll be safe, that they're loved, that they're going to get an equal shot at a good start in life. We have the success in schools around the state that are doing this extremely well. The programs of Out for Good in Minneapolis Public Schools, South High, peer education, giving teachers and administrators the capacity to respond, to communicate fully what's expected, and to bring kids into adulthood happy and healthy and safe. With that, I'm going to introduce my co-author, the state legislature, and before I do that, thank State Representative Karen Clark for being here in support of this measure as well. Co-author in the House, State Representative Jim Davnie.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Good morning. I'm Representative Jim Davnie. I also want to thank the others who are participating in the press conference this morning for their leadership on this issue and the courage that they demonstrate in pushing for safe schools for all of Minnesota's children. As Senator Dibble indicated, we passed this bill in 2009. We passed it after a great deal of discussion and debate, a healthy legislative process, and we reached across the aisle. We built and broadened a coalition, and we worked with the governor. Having safe schools for Minnesota's children is not a Democratic value, it's not a Republican value, it's not an Independence Party value, it's not a Green Party value, it's a Minnesota value. Parents want their children safe at school. They want them safe from those big, ugly, horrible, headline-grabbing events that happen too often. They want them safe from those little, everyday indignities that happen too often as well. They want a positive learning environment for all their children. And having safe schools for all sends the right message, provides the support and training for the staff, and creates an environment where everyone understands that everyone is valued, that everyone can contribute, that everyone can achieve, and that everyone has a place in the school. This morning I was at South High School with Commissioner Segrin on another education issue, and we met with a panel of students. And the students brought up that one of the real strengths of South High School and the strengths of the learning experience there was the diversity that they have in every imaginable way at that school, and that they learn better in a diverse environment that is conscious about who is there and about making sure that everyone there gets a chance to learn, to succeed, to exceed, and to take their place in college and career and as citizens when they graduate. Safe schools are a Minnesota value and one that we should make sure is safe for all students across the state. With that, I would like to welcome and thank Dr. Meininger for his work and bring him to the podium.
Thank you. Welcome to Gillette. Last month, I saw a young teen from one of our suburban school districts here at Gillette. The teachers in special education didn't know how to stop other kids from picking on him. And although he needed the special education, their answer was to move him to a school program where most of the children were severely mentally impaired and couldn't pick on him because they couldn't talk. "Dr. Eric," he said, "I'm in the 8th grade. They don't let you read at that school. They read to us." I got a call the day before yesterday from one of my colleagues. She was seeing a girl in our minor neural trauma clinic. We see kids there who have brain injuries. This high school kid has been bullied by the same child since she was in 3rd grade. Now we're seeing her here because she has a brain injury. She's afraid to go back to school. The girl who bullies her is still there. The school has suggested that she, the victim, should consider going to an online school. Now, I don't know the full story. I'm sure there are more to these than the kids tell me. As an adolescent medicine physician, however, I've learned to meet kids where they're at. Kids are often stigmatized because they're somehow different. The color of their skin, their religion, they're smart, they're not smart, their disability, their sexual orientation, their poverty. What I do know is that bullying is aggressive or intended to harm. Bullying is carried out repeatedly and over time, and bullying occurs in a relationship where a power imbalance exists. Aggressive or intended to harm, carried out repeatedly and over time, and in a relationship where a power imbalance exists. It can be direct, such as physical or verbal attacks, or it can be indirect, such as ignoring or gossiping through a third party with the intent to damage a social relationship. On July 9th of this year, Justin Auberg hanged himself because he'd been bullied at Anoka High School. He wasn't the first student to commit suicide there this year. He wasn't the second, he wasn't the third, he was the 5th. How many of our children have to die before we as a community say, something is wrong here? Being a victim causes depression, suicide, loneliness. It also affects success in school and later life. But bullies don't get off the hook either. They're more likely to end up with criminal records, they're more likely to end up abusing tobacco, drugs, alcohol, and they're more likely to be depressed too. Bullying is common, but it's not acceptable. It is not a normal part of growing up. It can't be. The cost is too great. We need to change the perception that this behavior is normative. We need to intervene early, and we need to provide leadership as the adults in this community. We cannot stand by with neutrality policies. We need to be proactive adults and take a stand that bullying in any of its forms is not acceptable. We need to recognize that both bullies and those who are bullied need our help and our support. It's not just a school problem. Kids will tell you that bullying happens in city parks and at their friends' homes too. But kids spend over 6 hours a day in school, and we know that a strong connection to school is a great protective factor against all negative outcomes. As parents, as health professionals, as the community, We need to support our school administrators in making policies that make our schools a safe place to build that connection. Oh, and this isn't just my opinion. The Minnesota Medical Association, the American Medical Association, the Academy of Pediatrics, Society for Adolescent Health and Medicine, American Public Health Association, and a number of other professional organizations agree. It's too late for Justin. If we don't do something now, who's next?
Thank you, Dr. Meininger. Next, I'd like to ask Monica Meyer, Executive Director of Outfront Minnesota, to come forward.
Hi, I'm Monica Meyer, the Executive Director of Outfront Minnesota, and we're a statewide organization working for equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Minnesotans. First off, I'd like to commend the authors of this bill for moving forward at such a critical time. Senator Dibble and Representative Davnie have been true champions in working to create a climate that's safe for all students to learn. Right now, as I think the other speakers will attest to, is that we're just, as a state, we're just not there for providing an education that is free from intolerance, free from fear for students. The Safe Schools for All, it'll really help improve our schools by providing consistent policies against intimidation and bullying. Because I think, what we all want is we want school to be a place where youth are inspired to learn and to grow. It should be a place that provides them with the skills, the hope, and the inspiration to truly thrive. And we know that the bullying and harassment that students are currently facing really hinders their education. Some students endure environments that are hostile to their education. And just to run through a few of the statistics from Minnesota and then on a national level, in 2009, GLSEN conducted a report. They released a report on school climate issues for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Minnesotans. What they found was that over 90% of LGBT students face harassment. 90%. And on a national level, over 44% of LGBT students were physically harassed, and 1 in 5 students were physically assaulted within their schools. And what that climate does is that sets up an environment where students are facing harassment, and often they feel like they have nowhere to go for help or support. And what GLSEN found was that the majority of the students who are facing this kind of bullying don't reach out to adults in the school because they don't feel like they're going to be able to they're going to be able to find the support they need to be able to address the bullying. And in fact, a third of the students who came forward across the nation found that when they did come forward to talk about their bullying that they were enduring, that the administration or teachers didn't really respond. And what we're finding is that when the schools lack policies that are clear about preventing discrimination and prohibiting bullying, the administration, the teachers, the students, and the parents often don't have the policies in place to really be able to bolster their work to address the bullying. So what I mean is that you've got we've got policies in Minnesota right now that address intimidation and bullying. The majority of the policies prohibit intimidation on the basis of race, religion, and sex. And what we found is that when you look at the policies across the state, over 93% of the school anti-intimidation policies do not include sexual orientation, and that over 80% of the policies do not prohibit intimidation on the basis of disability or national origin. And so, if you think about when you're talking about students getting bullied, what the Safe Schools for All Act will do is it will provide a comprehensive policy that really provides the tools for the schools to be able to address the bullying that's happening. It really provides it provides the resources that they need to be able to show that they can that they have the state support in moving forward on really being aggressive in countering any kind of bullying. Finally, you know, I know that there's lots of discussion about whether or not we need to have categories when we talk about anti-bullying efforts. Some people believe that that no bullying, of course, should be tolerated at all in schools, and that's true. And I know that you know, everybody believes that. But what studies show is that in fact that by categorizing and enumerating the policy to include and prohibit various types of discrimination, that the policies themselves enable the school districts to truly create a safer environment. And the Supreme Court agrees with enumeration. In Romer v. Evans, the Supreme Court explained that enumeration is the essential device used to make the duty not to discriminate concrete and to provide guidance to those who must comply. And we look forward to seeing this bill become law, and we look forward to a day when all students can go to school in a safe and affirming environment. Thanks.
Thanks, Monica. Let me also acknowledge and recognize State Representative Frank Hornstein, who's joined us to show his support. We have Lee Combs from the Family Partnership, who provides effective community-based response for parents, for kids, and for educators as well.
Thanks, Scott. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all the young people that I work with for giving me the courage to actually stand up here today and to speak. I run a program called the GLBT Kids Abuse Intervention Program, and I help manage a coalition called the Minnesota School Outreach Coalition. My dream and my goal is to work my way out of a job. I'd like a day where programs that protect kids from bullying and harassment, any kind, don't have to exist. That's not today. I have the privilege of going into schools across the state, from city to greater metro area to greater Minnesota. And when it comes to harassment related to gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender issues, they are often afraid. They don't know what to do. They don't have the skills. Students tell me all the time, we like our teachers. Our teachers are great. We think they're scared. We think they don't quite know what to do. We think they're uncomfortable with the issue. Young people are leading this. We need to listen. We need to pay attention. And we need to let them lead, and we need to support them with resources, with counsel, with doing things that make us uncomfortable sometimes. We have found over and over again, when you train the staff and you train teachers, you increase their knowledge, you increase their skill, and you increase their confidence, they will address bullying. They will address anti-gay bullying. The students notice the culture of the school changes. Overwhelmingly, students say, wow, our teachers are actually addressing this. Mr. So-and-so, the football coach, actually called me on a "that's so gay" comment. It happens, believe it. The impact of these policies will ensure that all staff, all teachers, all parents, and all families will have the resources, will have consistency. Teachers that are afraid will have backup. Students and families that don't know where the resources are will be able to find them. What used to be one person's problem, the person getting bullied, is an institutional problem. It's our problem. We need to address it. And I'm here to tell you once again, young people are taking a charge on this. Young people are taking their lives to make us listen. We need to listen. We have politicized this issue, and it is time to stop playing political games with young people's lives. I've never heard of a young person hurting themselves or killing themselves because a teacher stood up in the classroom and said, "Not in my classroom." But you know what? I know young people who have killed themselves, who have hurt themselves, because no one ever stood up for them. Making schools safe for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender teachers, educators, and families makes the school safe for all young people to learn, all young people to thrive, all teachers to teach, and all families to have a school that they can celebrate. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. We have Jean Bender, who's a parent and a volunteer with ARC of Minnesota, to share a little bit about her story, because we know, of course, this issue affects so many kids in so many different ways.
Thank you for having me here today. I apologize for my voice, but I think it speaks to how important it is that we share the information that we have and we show support for this bill. The ARC of Minnesota is an organization that provides advocacy, support, and information for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their family. And as a volunteer for this organization and as a parent of a 23-year-old with multiple disabilities, I can tell you how unsafe our schools are for some individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. My son has not only been affected by the use of the R word, retard or retarded, but it affects his siblings profoundly as well. And it takes a lot of risk for other students to have reached out for him and befriend him when they know that they are at risk to also be teased because of that. We have a pop culture and a media culture that thinks that the R word is an okay word to use if it's used in satire, if it's used in a self-deprecating way to talk about something that you can't do. Most of you are probably familiar with the movie Tropic Thunder that came out a few years ago, and when individuals like my friend Hunter, who has fetal alcohol syndrome, is reduced to tears and asked, you would understand why it's not okay to describe herself in a self-deprecating way. And when our pop culture says that's okay, then our teens and our youth are going to say that that's okay. And so wouldn't it be great if we could pass this legislation and our current students not only are safe in their schools, but they set the example for those of us who didn't do it years ago. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. And to wrap up, we have Phil and Barb Schrader, who are parents who have a story to share as well.
Hi, we're here to tell our story, but we have a son who happens to be gay. He is happy, talented, he always loved music, dance, and theater. He had many friends. He was voted class president in 7th grade. He just did really well in school. He came out at the end of 7th grade, and after that, his friends started dropping off. He endured 3 years of harassment, bullying. He was pushed in the halls. He was called names. He was harassed in classrooms, bathrooms, in the community. It finally, at the 9th grade homecoming game, he was in a porta potty there, and kids gathered around the porta potty, started shaking it, and tried to tip it over. He came out, and they were circling him. He no longer felt safe to go to school. We didn't know what to do. We did go to the school, and I guess my husband. Well, and I guess at that point, though, also, his behavior changed so dramatically that we were frightened for him. And until his cousin called us and said he was contemplating suicide, you know, he didn't tell us. He didn't really tell us about the bullying until we got him to talk about it. And then he had a plan. He had a plan to take an overdose. We would have lost our son, so I guess this story is different for us. We have our boy. But as the senator mentioned, there's a whole list of kids who are no longer with us.
I just want to thank the group for allowing us to come and speak. I think on Barb's comment about the suicide, one thing I just learned, I'm constantly learning as a dad of a gay son, that this group of children is extremely silent and two reasons. One is they want to protect their parents. So in other bullying situations, they might come forward and have things to share with their parents or things in common. But in this case, the fear and not knowing what the reaction of their own parents are going to be to this is really different than other situations, and I think that's really important. I think what I'd like to add to Barb's story here is as a dad, is there's a number of incidents I can really recall clearly about my son coming out as gay. And then there's two very specific to this legislation and while we're here, so I'm just extra pleased to be here. The first was, of course, everyone remembers in our families of when the person came out gay in your family, and certainly I remember that day. And I remember him talking, and you know, there's, of course, you expect some emotions, and it wasn't really disbelief, it wasn't shock, a little bit of sadness, because, okay, I got my 7th grade son, I'm a heterosexual man who likes sports, and I could tell this was going to be a different relationship probably, so that was maybe a little sadness. But you know, the overriding emotion I felt at that point was fear. He instantly, at that point, became somebody who was different. And worse yet, he was different on sexual orientation. In my experience, I'm an educator as well, my experience growing up was I saw a giant target go up on his back. And I knew what was in store for him. And I was really scared for him. The trouble was, it wasn't long before those fears were realized, and of course some of these incidents came up, and so I made my trip to the school. I went to school to advocate, of course, for my son. My expectation was, in this day and age, of course we have a policy against this. This is a human rights issue, protected class, like we mentioned, racism, sexism. We had those, and of course we'd have it about sexual preference. No, we didn't, and I was really surprised. And what I found was that this type of bullying was not dealt with any more vigorously or as any other bad behavior that might happen in a high school setting. It was basically, boys will be boys, these are high school hijinks. So when I get around to it, I will bring these folks in and we'll have a talk about it. I was expecting swift, I was expecting a policy that had swift action and a easily understood process to deal with this, and I was really surprised. I found sympathetic teachers, as we've all heard that this morning, and overwhelmed administrators. I have no one to point fingers at. Some indifferent administrators, but I saw people that weren't equipped to deal with this topic. When I saw the legislation, even last year, and now again reading it over, this is what my particular school district needed at that time 3 years ago. That's what is needed. This is written exactly to address and resolve all of the issues that we're talking about today. Now, is this an emergency? Yes, it is. This should be in the special session. We have students dying day by day, as you report. If there is an emergency, what is? And I'm just happy to support this bill, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Questions?
Senator, how will you push this in the special session outside of an agreement, a pre-agreement with the governor and leaders, and do you think the effort might hurt the legislation in the long run?
Well, your first question, the legislature, the governor calls a special session typically for a specific reason, but the Constitution is clear. He doesn't, he can't dictate all the issues that the legislature takes up, nor the duration of that session. So the legislature is a co-equal branch of government to the executive branch. And the Constitution is clear that the legislature can deal with any issue that it sees fit that's pressing, that really needs to be responded to and addressed. So that's what we're doing. We're elected to represent people and solve problems and really do the business of the people. So what we're going to do, of course, is continue to press our case with our colleagues, and figure out the process that goes forward here. I can't tell you how it's going to unfold. If we were to go through the normal process, it'd be several days. If we would go through the process that I think the flood and tornado bill is going to go through, we would need to declare an urgency. Is it going to hurt the legislation? I hope we get the legislation passed in special session. If we don't, I think we just, we continue moving on.
Have you received any hint at all from DFL leaders that they will entertain this bill in any fashion?
No, I have not received any hint from, we're continuing to have conversations. They have not rejected the proposal.
And same thing in the House.
And already Republican critics are saying this is an attempt to embarrass Governor Pawlenty, embarrass Representative Emmer running for governor.
Well, anyone who is responding politically, I can only respond by saying is just being cynical. We are talking about kids and families. Lee Combs said it best. It is time to stop playing politics with the lives of kids in our community and our families. Anyone who's going to be embarrassed will be embarrassed by their own choosing.
By introducing this during the governor's race when this issue has come up in the past couple of days, does that inherently make it political?
It's not the governor's race that is causing this to be an issue. This is an issue in people's lives and in our communities.
Sure, but the timing of it, does that in any way make it political just by
the timing is that we have a special session, we have the opportunity to respond to people in crisis.
I mean, look at the coverage of bullying and the tragedies across the country in the media the last number of weeks and months. We didn't choose the timing for this. This has not been any maneuvering. This is simply a recognition that there's a crisis in our schools, that we're the adults in the state, that we need to do what we're doing here today of sending a message to kids that there are people who care, that we're working, that there's hope, that it gets better, as the campaign says, but also to stand up and say, we've got some fingers and some hands on the levers of the state, and we're going to try and make things better.
Are you willing to sacrifice the aid to flood victims for this?
What?
If the governor says, I'm not going to call a special session because you brought this up.
Well,
I mean,
let's just be clear. I can't imagine why he would do that. We are responding to people in crisis. People who have had the devastation of the floods, the devastation of the tornado up in Wadena, the devastation of this crisis in young people's lives. I don't think we're running any risk of sacrificing anything. So no, I mean, I can't imagine that would happen. So.
And I know Pat already asked about the DFL leadership, but is there any indication that they would, or have you gotten any sense that they might say, save this for January, save this for another time? No inclination one way or the other?
Yeah, no one has said anything of the sort to wait. We have an election certificate. We're here to represent people. We're a co-equal branch of government. Leadership hasn't said anything. I mean, I sense that the leadership feels some fidelity to an arrangement, an agreement with the governor. But, we continue to have that conversation. They have not given me any indication as such, though.
Can I ask a question of Lee, perhaps? One of the things, if you could come forward, one of the things that we're hearing, and you don't have to answer this politically, but in this political year, we're hearing that we don't need this. We're hearing from some of the candidates, particularly for governor, and from Governor Pawlenty, as we know over the last couple of years. What we need is parents to be educated. You don't need a law, but you are in the schools and you see something different.
What's the question?
That's the question. Why do we need a law
because of
when parents can do
what
this?
Phil's story was, with the lack of policies in the school, and with this being politicized, teachers being afraid, principals being afraid. Being afraid and not doing anything is doing something. Afraid of political backlash, of people in their community not wanting to address bullying because they think, especially based on gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, because I don't know what they're afraid of, but...
Why can't parents do this?
They're not.
That's what you say.
It would be great if parents I mean, parents have stepped up, many parents have stepped up, but I think all schools, even regardless of this issue, need more parental involvement. I think that's around all.
As an adolescent development specialist, Dr. Meininger can tell you, even when we have loving parents, kids spend a tremendous amount of their time in the schools, and we have these repeated stories about teachers completely who want to act affirmatively but don't feel like they have the support, the backing, the resources, and their time at school is so crucial.
Parents do. I'm sorry. Parents do step up. You know, we have some good examples of that. The problem is that it's not enough. There are a lot of parents that are indifferent. It doesn't affect their kid. Why should I, you know, make this an issue until somebody kills themselves, and then they say, well, wow, this could be my kid. I think that there's not, you know, parents don't have enough power to say, hey, this is wrong. Let's change something. I think parental involvement is very important, but that's not the only piece. We know that the strongest protective factors for young people are connection to an adult, ideally a parent. If this is something they can't talk about yet with their parents, they don't have that protective factor. The second most important protection factor is connection to school. If school's not a safe place, they don't have that protective factor. The third most important protective factor is their community. If we don't make this a safe place for young people, we need to do something as a community. If we don't make it a safe place, they will continue to be bullied, continue to be hurt, and continue to have bad outcomes.
Why would this legislation do what policies that already exist in schools haven't done? What is there about the wording of this proposal that would be more successful than existing school policies?
Well, this here's the bill. Jackets, visually, and it simply provides a level of specificity that we have lacked to date in our laws. So we have a law, but it's not specific. It's vague, and it gives no direction. And administrators, school districts, teachers, they don't know how to respond, what exactly they're expected to do, how to enforce, how to promulgate, etc. So the bill just provides a level of specificity that's very important to kind of establish the bedrock foundation in policy, what we expect. So we expect no kid to be harassed or bullied for any reason, and particularly those kids who received a disproportionate level of bullying. And then it goes on to say, and you're going to communicate those standards, and you're going to enforce on those standards, and you're going to train on those standards.
And it not only it not only clarifies, it simplifies. Right now, the state statute on bullying makes a reference over to the state human rights statute. The Safe Schools for All legislation brings the human rights statute and those protected classes into the state's bullying statute, so that when parents are looking for help, they see their child listed in the school's bullying policy, so that the school's policy hold up a mirror to the community and show the full spectrum of kids in the community's schools. And to go back to the point that this is mainstream Minnesota values, in the last 17 years, tens of thousands of bills on every issue imaginable have been introduced in the Minnesota legislature. Not one of those proposed a change to the State Human Rights Act. Tens of thousands of bills, not one proposal to change the State Human Rights Act. Because this is core, bedrock Minnesota values that everybody is worthy of respect, everyone is a person of dignity, and in our schools, everyone should have a chance to learn.
You mentioned the 2009 veto. Can you remind us what happened in the 2010 session? What happened?
We took no action on the bill in the 2010 session, looking at the fact that there hadn't been any change in the players at that time. The governor's office was not interested in stepping forward and looking at the legislation differently.
So what's changed? Why try now?
I think the growing concern across the state and across the nation on the impact of bullying and the growing recognition that we're the adults in the room and we need to take action to protect the children in the state.
And the fact is, we've lost a number of lives. You know, every week we open up the paper, we've lost another young person. That's what's changed. We have a new session. You know, in 2010 we were still in the same session, so we had a bill that we had passed and it died. It got killed by the governor. We have a new session. We have a new opportunity to take a fresh approach at this, and we have the evidence of the consequence and the aftermath of that veto.
Is this the same bill? Or,
This is the bill as introduced with some minor technical changes. Yeah.
Has this been done in other states? Has legislation like this been introduced in other states, and has it succeeded?
Oh, absolutely. Who knows what other states? A number of other states have passed legislation very similar to this. Iowa! Neighbors to the south.
So if this is not acted upon or vetoed by the governor, then because we'll have the governor, he sure do this again.
You bet. Well, yeah, we're gonna. I'm assuming I get reelected. Not gonna win. Don't want to take anything for granted. We'll absolutely stay at this until we get this passed. I will not leave the legislature until this is passed.
And I mean, this is part of a growing movement. This morning in my email were copies of petitions from Rochester area schools with 120 signatures of high school students saying, "Stopping bullying begins with me." And that is part of a movement organized by the National PACER, another advocate, much like ARC, for students with disabilities. It's part of a national movement. It's growing, and we're recognizing that we need to take action to protect all of our children.
All right. Well, thank you all
very much.
Thank you all very much.
I just wanted to ask a bit about why this legislation is being introduced now, or why this topic is coming to a head now. Could you provide us kind of a little Minnesota and national context of why now?
Well, I think that we've all seen in the papers and the national press all of the issues that have come up with some of the teen suicides, some of our celebrities getting behind the issue like Ellen DeGeneres and some others. But on the other side of the issue, you have pop culture that still says it's okay to use the R word, retard or retarded, as self-deprecating or a way to put yourself down or to put others down, and it's seen as accepted or entertainment. And so I think whenever we have a chance to say these specific kinds of harassment and bullying are not okay, that we need to speak up. I feel so badly for all of the parents who've lost their children and for all of the individuals who have seen suicide as their option to end their pain. But it doesn't just affect the individual who's bullied. It affects those who are connected to them. My son is not verbal. He can't say how it makes him feel if someone calls him the R word. But his siblings sure can. Or the compassionate student who's reached out to him can hear that and then has to weigh in that difficult teenage time. Do I put myself out here for him when then I could become a target? And so I think because we have a chance to do something, we need to do something. And obviously, if the more general legislation we have on the books right now were enough, it wouldn't continue to happen. But the fact that it does says we need specific legislation saying these specific groups of people are being bullied and it's not okay.
On a somewhat more general note, I mean, aside from political legislation to address this, what else needs to happen in our culture, in our country, for these issues to be recognized and dealt with?
Well, I know that the ARC, the ARC, and several states have campaigns, spread the word to end the R word. And there were boycotts of the movie of Tropic Thunder. My entire family, including my teenage kids, boycotted the movie because of the use of the R word. One of the things that happened was one of the propaganda for that particular movie was to have a T-shirt that said "Go Full Retard." And because of the outcry of grief and anger about that, the company never did develop that T-shirt with that slogan. And so I think as long as in pop culture it's still okay to say that we need to do whatever we can, whether it's speaking up, signing petitions, as the PACER has the petitions drive going. I think we need to join in, because when you hear someone doing it without repercussion, then you think it's okay. My son has been called a retard to his face. What are you doing, you retard? And it's not okay. It's taking his disability and something he didn't understand and blaming him for it and shaming him for it, for something that he has no control over.
Jean, would you mind giving us your full name and title?
My name is Jean Bender, and I am a volunteer for the ARC of Minnesota.
Oh, and one final question. I don't know too much about the movie Tropic Thunder. Would you mind telling us just briefly, you know, what it's about and where it's misstepped in regards to this, what we're talking about?
The movie Tropic Thunder came out a few years ago, and it was a movie that satirized the movie business. And so they had, for example, Robert Downey Jr., who was an actor who supposedly had a role that he played in blackface. And then they had a character who was playing a person with intellectual disabilities. And that phrase, "go full retard," came out of, you didn't just go halfway like some other movies like Rain Man. You went full retard. And he was receiving praise for the way he made fun of, in this role, individuals with developmental disabilities.
Thank you so much. Lee, you look great. You're spritzed. If you wouldn't mind just giving us your full name and position and kind of why you're here for the uptake, and you know, and tell us why this has come to a head right now.
Well, my name's Lee Combs, and I run a program called the GLBT Kids Abuse Intervention Program. It's a program of the Family Partnership. It used to be Family and Children's Service. And I'm here because Senator Dibble called me. I honestly, I'm here because the young people, I'm just giving voice to try to get people to listen. They've been pretty loud and pretty clear, and sadly, some tragic expression of a lot of unmet needs and, you know, the suicides. And so I am here because that's the work I do, and I feel that it's part of my job to try to voice what the need is.
I mean, there was a... Sorry? That's okay, don't worry. We're just two people talking here. I mean, there was a suicide that got a lot of attention on the East Coast. I think it was Yale. A student whose roommate, I believe, posted a videotape of him on the internet, which thanks. Hey, the tragedy of that, did that help bring this topic to the forefront? Why we're talking about it today politically as well?
I have no idea. I think it added to. You know, I think there's a different culture in high schools, in middle schools, and grade schools than there are in college campuses. But a life is a life, and a young person's a young person. And bullying and intimidation and harassment is that. I mean, where do kids learn it? From adults. When do you become an adult? It's not really clear in our culture, actually, when you do, right? So they're connected, yet I think they're different environments.
I know that here, this press conference, political solutions have been talked about, or political legislation has been talked about. What else needs to happen in our culture in America, you know, to deal with these issues, to confront them correctly?
Well, I'm a firm believer that adults especially, but all people, we need to look young people in the eye with kindness and compassion and let them know we see them and want to know more about them. And I think that really there's such lack of connection. To not be seen for who you are and to not be able to be who you are is, and nowhere. I mean, if you can't be at school, I know kids that at home's not safe, but they can come to school and kind of be themselves. I know kids that school is their respite. School is a safe place, you know, even though there is bullying and harassment, it's safer than home. And so I forgot your question, but that's...
No, that was great. That's a really interesting point that and I suppose this legislation would help schools become that safe haven, especially when they have parents who are intolerant and don't understand them.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, you can be in a community, in small communities, there's all kinds of social status, and if a loud person with a lot of social status is saying, no, this is, you know, we don't want this gay stuff, people that have less power and privilege are not less willing to challenge that. They're afraid, and they don't have what they see as the power to do that. I mean, that's why young people taking the lead is a really powerful force. These adults are scrambling to catch up, especially the ones that know it's the right thing to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're live. I know we talked about this during the press conference, so you did, but very curious as to why now? Not necessarily from a political perspective in Minnesota, but why nationwide is this coming to a head now, and why are you acting on this now?
You know, you ask an excellent question that I just simply don't have the answer to. I'm wondering myself, because of course young people have been bullied. I just pulled a newspaper out of my boxes of savings, accumulated stuff that I've gathered up over the years, and I just moved households, and so I was going through boxes and pulled out a newspaper from 1992 that featured gay teenagers and was extensive reporting on the level of bullying and intimidation. I graduated from high school in 1983. This was my experience. This has been going on for years and years. Kids have been harming themselves. You know, it was the same with the moment that Matthew Shepard was murdered, anti-gay violence. So who knows why now? But you know, I'm happy that at least folks are paying attention now.
A question was asked by a fellow journalist whether this hypothetically could derail the flood legislation that might come forward in a special session, I think, within the next few days. I was wondering, could it have the opposite effect? I mean, could the flood legislation, which obviously is crucial and will have to pass because it's necessary, could that help this pass as well?
That's an interesting hypothetical question. I guess it remains to be seen. You know, obviously there's a tremendous amount of energy and momentum that cuts across all partisan lines. We passed the bill initially on a bipartisan basis. A lot of folks are intensely interested in making sure that young people are safe. So it's a good argument. Maybe I'll make that argument. We're only here to help. You know, I can't imagine that the governor would withdraw the flood bill because he's scared of dealing with bullying against kids. If he does, that would be sad and tragic on his part.
Has his rhetoric, or for that matter, national Republican politics, changed at all since 2009 when this effort failed here?
You know, but I do know that among rank-and-file Republicans and a number of Republicans who are in other kinds of positions of leadership, the spouses and the kids of significant Republican leaders, Mary Cheney, or not Mary Cheney, but Cindy McCain and others, Laura Bush, have really come out strongly in the corner of GLBT folks with respect to marriage equality legislation. I'm guessing a number of rank-and-file Republican folks understand that this is the right thing to do.
Well, and I think that even Sarah Palin chastised Rahm Emanuel for using the R word at one point, right? Okay. Last question. I mean, do we know where Mark Dayton, Tom Emmer, Tom Horner stand on this issue?
Well, you know, I want to be very careful. I'm not pursuing this issue in the context of the gubernatorial race. We have a special session. We have an opportunity to act, to complete what we started in 2009 that was vetoed by the governor. It's an emergency. It's a crisis, and it seems to be a moment in which a lot of people are paying attention to this issue. But yeah, I mean, they've spoken for themselves. I mean, this has come up in their races because people are paying attention to this issue. Emmer has voted against this in the past, said he will continue to be not supportive of anti-bullying legislation. Horner and Dayton have both indicated that they would support such a bill. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.